Hi folks, welcome to Thomas Aaron Photography. I'm Tom. Hopefully last week you watched our first part of this two-part video series in which I talked about equipment setup, and capturing an image for a beautiful low-key dog portrait. In this episode, we are going to cover post-processing. So this is part 2 of that series. Now, if you haven't already, don't forget to sign up for our email. The link is below. When we get that, we will send you a free PDF download with 3 marketing tips that helped me a lot back in the days when I was a professional dog photographer, and I think that it will help you as well. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to catch our next piece of content. Let's get started. Let's get cracking here. Real quick, a note on the software I'm using. I am using Photoshop version 2024, so the most recent version. The reason I'm using it is because if you are a professional photographer, you know this. If you're not a professional photographer, you probably need to know that you're probably going to need to know something about Photoshop and have at least a basic understanding of how it works, because you well may end up using it from time to time. There is another piece of software that you could use to edit this photo. There's actually 2 more. One is Affinity Photo, and I'm going to include a link below. Now, a couple of years ago, I actually think Affinity Photo was better than Photoshop when it comes to editing photos. And the reason I say that is because it wasn't a subscription-based service. You can just buy the software. And number 2, back then, its contextual abilities to replace an element in the photo or delete an element and fill it with a smart, filling that fits in with the rest of the picture. It was actually better than Photoshop's contextual image or contextual replacement. And I actually did a video on that. It's not on this channel, and I'm not quite sure where it is nowadays, but it's been a couple of years ago. But I even did a video to kind of show what I was talking about. That said, the things I'm going to be doing here in Photoshop are actually very basic, base knowledge of how Photoshop works and how to use it, and you can apply it and grow from it. So I like to think I'm giving you a basis to grow from here. And the instructions I give you, since they're very basic, you can probably take those instructions even today and go straight to Affinity Photo and just do the exact same thing I'm telling you to do in Photoshop, and it should work. If there's any differences, then you can usually research them pretty quickly. Now, the other piece of software I've used to do this is Capture One Pro, and I'm going to include a link to that as well. Now, in Capture One Pro, the benefit of it is I think that it handles color probably better than Photoshop by a little bit. And a lot of professional portrait and headshot photographers and stuff like that love Capture One Pro. It is a proven, extremely good piece of software. The only thing is the very last step of this editing process that I'm going to give you, which is optional. You don't have to do it, but you might like it. You can't really do in Capture One Pro. But if you have Capture One Pro and Photoshop, you can actually pull up Photoshop directly from Capture One Pro and do this last step. So you got a lot of options here, and you may even know of other options. Those are the 3 pieces of software that I use, though, the most. So the next thing is the edits that I'm going to be doing here will give you they'll give you a baseline workflow from which to grow. But, if you shoot a different color dog or the dog's in a different posture, there may be things that you have to change, but this will give you a basis to grow from. Final thing before we start editing is, I am not going to be talking a lot about keyboard shortcuts. I will mention them from time to time, but I'm not going to be using them. I'm going to be using menu items and actually clicking on icons and stuff like that, because I want the beginning users of Photoshop to be able to figure this out easily without having to remember keyboard shortcuts. If you're already know all the keyboard shortcuts or know a lot of them, then feel free to use them. Okay, I'm also going to include a link to this image in the description below, so that if you want to follow along, you can use this very image to do it. All right, let's get started. So in Photoshop, it's generally a good idea to create a background duplicate layer, which I just did. We'll just leave it named background copy. And so to do that, I right-clicked on over here near the title of the layer and just click duplicate layer. That's all you got to do. Now, the first part of my actual workflow here is to sort of examine the dog and see what needs to be changed. Now, you might look at this and think, holy cow, this is really good right out of camera. You could send it right off to the printer, and if you said that, you'd be right. You could. But I do see a couple of ways that I can improve this image, okay? The first one that just jumps out at me is, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but when I zoom in here, this part of Rooster's hair is kind of, has a little bit of an orange tint to it. Also, his ear right here has a little bit of an orange tint. And his eyes, while his eyes in this image are beautiful, and he does have pretty eyes, they are not this saturated. This is a little more orangey. There's an orange element to it that is not really true to Rooster. So I'm using my magnifying tool here, so it's the little hourglass tool. If you can't find it, you can go to your little help icon here and type in magnify, and you'll see it. It's called the zoom tool, actually. Magnify. You see zoom tool. Okay. I call it the magnifying glass. So you can find your zoom tool that way, or you can go to edit, toolbar, and you can see all your tools here, and you can just add them over there. So zoom tool, let's see, zoom them back out here. Okay. All right, I like that. All right, so let's do some work on his fur first. We're going to draw out the shadows a little bit. I feel like it's a little bit dark, not a lot. I could pretty much go with this. I like it, but I would like to try drawing out the shadows a little bit and desaturating the fur a little bit, okay? So I deal with the fur first. Now, when I desaturate the fur, I'm going to do it as a global sort of adjustment. So it may desaturate these eyes too, or it may not do enough. We'll see. And we may have to do the eyes separately. So now, one way that you could draw out the darks in the fur a little bit is you could go to image, adjustments, and shadows and highlights. Oh, that jumped it way up to 35% automatically, so you just drop it back down to 0. Now you could move this up to, say, 2% maybe, and I actually like that, right? And so that's good. I could just run with that. My only problem with that is that it actually incorporated the changes into the background copy, which means if I decide I need to change them later, I cannot. So without losing all my edits and clicking, undo multiple times to back all the way back to this step. So I really don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. So that'd be, or you could just go edit, undo highlights. Let's do it that way. So here's the better way to do it, is to create an adjustment layer for every adjustment that you make as best as you can. So I'm highlighting my background copy. Now I go down here to this little icon, which creates adjustment layers, and I click it and go up to curves. Now, this may look a little complicated if you're not used to it, but this is called a histogram, and it represents all the darks and lights in this image. So all the way over here at the left is the darks. You can tell because if you want to adjust the darks, there's a little black triangle here. And if you want to adjust the lights, there's a little white triangle. So if you pull down your lights or pull up your whites, you can see that it blows them out basically. Or you can take your darks and click that triangle and pull them and make them darker, or make them, you can make them brighter or whatever. Okay, so all that you really need to know for this particular step is that here's blacks, here's lights, right? And right here are shadows. And some of these shadows they're not actual shadows being cast, but they're considered shadows, meaning they're less than black. They're brighter than black, but they're not light. So the shadows on the histogram are going to be located just on the light side of dark, right? So they're going to be in this area somewhere, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my little cursor on this line and click and hold, left click, and I'm just going to pull up a little bit. So I don't know if you see that, but that pulls up those shadows a little bit, brightens them up, and it does not blow out our whites. So I am going to run with that. That's all you got to do, and then you can just save that. So here is this adjustment. So we're going to rename it. We know it's a curves adjustment. If you ever want to go back to it, you just come click here, double click it, and there it is, and you can make other adjustments. Okay, you can reset it or whatever you want to do, or you can just delete it altogether. Okay, so there's that. Now we're going to rename this. I just double click on this, and we're just going to call it Fur Shadows. And when I'm rushing through a edit, I won't do all this, but I'm just kind of trying to give you a base. Now, I don't need to do it. I can just leave this layer highlighted, and I'm going to go and work on the saturation. So I create another adjustment layer and go up to hue and saturation. And all I'm going to do is desaturate this a little bit. And I don't know if you can see the difference on your YouTube video, but right there. So I went like -4%. Now let's go a little further. Okay, there's -5%. Click that, it goes away. And I'm going to put right here Fur Saturation. Okay. And now my orangey stuff is pretty much gone. And the eyes actually desaturated a little bit, but I don't know if it's enough. I think we're still going to have to do some work on those here in a second. Yeah, we are. A little bit of work on those. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. Now, the next problem that I see with this image is that if you look, his camera left eye is brighter than his camera right eye. And that's because he actually sat to an angle at the camera, or to an angle, at an angle to the camera. And then he cocked his head in this sort of funny way. And it just caused this eye to be in a little more shadow. Not a big deal. So to adjust that, here's what I like to do. First, I'm going to just get this eye the right brightness. Then I'll adjust the saturation of both eyes together. So what I'm going to do is and this is usually the second part of my process, right? First I do fur, then I do eyes, okay? So I'm going to click my lasso tool, right? What did that say? That said you could hit L, right, for your lasso tool. I'm just going to click it. Okay, so now I got my lasso tool. I'm going to zoom this in a little bit further by just sort of spreading my fingers on the mouse pad. And I'm going to take the lasso tool and I'm just going to draw a nice little circle right around his eyes. Now, I could have used a selection tool to do that, but honestly, I pre-edited this picture to test what I was going to show you guys, and for whatever reason, the selection tool just doesn't do great on his eyes. So anyway, I did that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten him up. So I'm just going to add a little bit of exposure to this eye so that it brightens up and it matches that one better. It's not much, but I'm a kind of a perfectionist, I think, maybe. So I click my adjustment tool, or I create an adjustment layer for exposure. Boom. So there it is. Now I can go to my exposure, and as I crank it up, you can watch this eye. Watch, see it get brighter, darker, right? So set it back to 0, and I'm just going to brighten it up a tad till it feels like it's about the same, and that feels like about right there to me. So I brought it up, 0.43. Then you just get rid of that. Okay. So now I've got that. So there's my adjustment layer. So I'm just going to call that right. So I'm meaning camera right. So maybe I should write that cam right eye. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to get the saturation out of both eyes. So I'm going to actually click select and reselect. And that'll reselect that eye. And now I'm going to select this eye. So you want to make sure that up here, that this sort of double square box where both of them are filled in, that icon is clicked. That is, what do they call that? They call that the add to selection. Yeah, add to selection box. So I go here and I just select this eye like that. Now that eye's selected, okay? So I'm going to create a saturation layer, right? So I go back down to my adjustments. Oh, hit the wrong thing. Let me just delete that and try again. Hue saturation, bam. Okay. So I'm just going to rename this both eyes saturation, okay? All right. So now I'm just going to take my saturation slider and I'm going to go left, and it's only going to affect the eyes, right? So I'm just going to bring them down a little bit, about like that. Now that looks exactly like Rooster's eyes, okay? So if you want to see these things, watch. I'm going to use my fingers and pinch in to kind of zoom this back down just a little bit so you can see what's happening. Watch. So if you want to see the eyes, the changes in the eyes, watch. Before, after, before, after. I don't know how well your color is on your computer, but you can definitely see it when you're editing it. If you want to see the right eye, watch. Before, it's dark. After, it's brighter. Notice these are subtle changes. If you want to see the change in the fur saturation, there's before and after. And if you want to see the shadows, it's before, after. Okay, so I can go back and adjust any of these separately at any time. Now, I've got the bulk of the work done here. It's really that simple. If you're taking a good picture, then you don't have to do a lot. But I do think actually the one thing I am going to go ahead and do is try to adjust the nose a little bit. Here is the issue with the nose, is that I'm going to sharpen it. I'm going to use the sharpening feature. So if you go to filter, notice the sharpening feature. Well, we'll see. I could go, there's a couple of options. Okay, I could go back down to my background copy layer, and then I could go to filter, sharpen, and unsharp mask and sharpen it from there if I wanted. But if I do that, it's going to build the sharpening into that background copy, meaning I can't go back and change it without undoing a bunch of stuff. So I don't want to do that. The best way I have found to do this with just the nose would be to turn all these layers into what's called a smart object. And all a smart object is, it's a container that contains all these layers. And then you can make adjustments on that container just like it was the background copy, right? But you can create filters that you can change. So it's kind of complicated, but let's just go through the process and it should make more sense. So you click on your background copy and you go up and you hit shift, your shift key, and click on the top one, and it highlights those layers, right? And so then you come over here near the names of the layers, you right click, you go down and click convert to smart object. Now, boom, it converts all those, and you see a little icon here that shows it's a smart object. But now what I can do is I can actually create an adjustment, a specific adjustment that with my smart filters, which I'll show you, to his nose. So let's select his nose. So again, we have our lasso tool. I'm just going to go right here. I'm just going to trace nicely around his nose. This would not work very well with the selection tool either, I'm guessing, because the color of his nose is so close to the color of the adjacent fur. But so I just made a little selection, nothing real fancy. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, and Unsharp Mask. So we get to Unsharp Mask, and then it automatically picked a level at which to sharpen it, but that's too much for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop the radius down. So that's how many pixels are being affected at a time, as best I understand it. I'm going to drop it down to about 3.5 pixels is usually what I use. And then I'm just going to drop this amount all the way down to 1. So there's really no blur there, or no sharpening there. And I'm just going to raise it up and play with it till I find a level that I think looks right. And I think that's probably about right there at 26. Now I'm just going to click OK and watch what happens to my layers. Boom, I've got a smart filter, right? So I can, if I want to go back and adjust this, I can just double click Unsharp Mask and play with it. You can also drag this. These little previews, the windows are so small, so you'd have to drag over and find his nose. We're getting close right there. And you can sort of turn off the preview. Turn it on, it doesn't do much. Anyway, and you can kind of see what you're doing. So if you notice, his nose is sharpened, but I did not overdo it, okay? I just want it sharpened a little. So here's the thing. If you remember in the previous video when I was shooting this image, I used aperture of f6.3 to make sure his eyes were sharp and his nose wasn't too blurry. Now, it's okay if there's a little blur on the nose, but you don't want it to be just blurred out. If it's just completely blurred out, it looks really bad. Rooster has a really long nose. There's a long distance, probably, let me look at him. I don't know, man. There's probably 6 or 7 inches. He's from his eyes to his nose. So there was still a little blur even at f6.3. But if you want to see before and after, you can just go down here to this little eyeball icon near Unsharp Mask, and there's before and after. Very little change. Okay, I'm happy with that. The final part of my workflow with this, one other thing I want to say about the smart object. So if you decide that you're like, you know what, I want to change something, at this point, you probably aren't going to have to change any of the previous adjustments we made, but if you do need to, you can just go over here near the name. You can right click and go down to convert to layers. And it'll convert this back to layers, and you can make your adjustments. You'll probably, I think, have to redo your masking on the nose. But I'm not going to try that right now. Okay. So the final thing I like to do is this. I'm going to go back to my zoom tool or my magnifying glass, and I'm going to pull in. And if you notice, there's a lot of little specks of dust on Rooster. There's a whole bunch. Like, they're all over him. And you know what? This is a dog. He's an outdoor dog. He's a rough and tumble guy. He likes to go roll around and chase stuff. And he's just going to be dirty, and most dogs are. They're going to have specks of dust all over him. So what we're going to do is we're going to start fixing these and get this down just a little bit. And this could be a time-consuming process. So I'm going to just show you how to do it. I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to try to completely clean Rooster up, but I'll just show you some of the things I look for. So I just start down at the bottom, basically, and work my way up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my smart object is selected, right? And then I'm going to create a new layer using just the layers icon. Or no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. Create a new layer. So this isn't an adjustment layer. It's just a regular old alpha channel layer, the pixel layer. So I click on it, creates a layer up above, right? So then I'm going to go over here to my spot removal or spot healing brush. Okay, so again, you can find it with your help thing, or you can go to edit, toolbar, and find it there. But I've already got it pulled up, set in my computer so that it shows up. So I'm going to click the spot healing brush tool. Bam. Then all you got to do is use your bracket keys. Actually, let's see I use or you could go here and set the size, right, to whatever you want. You can set the hardness. I'm actually going to set that hardness down to about 50% on this so it blends better. Maybe a little more. You don't want your adjustments to be noticeable, right? I'm going to go 70%. And you can adjust the size of your brush tool with this. But one keyboard shortcut thing that I actually do use all the time is my bracket key. So I can use my bracket keys on my computer to increase or decrease the size. So I'm going to make this brush fairly small. And I'm just going to start going over Rooster and finding the specks of dust. So like there's one, bam, gone, right? There's one, gone, gone. And I just keep working it one speck at a time until I get them all cleaned up. Not super hard. I think I'm going to increase the hardness of my brush just a little bit on this. Okay, and I just keep clicking. Boys, this dog's a dusty beast, okay? So, and you can just keep doing that. Now, here's another thing with dogs you want to look for is stray hairs, okay? They got stray hairs all over them. So there's one. I'm just going to go like that. Boom, gone. Here's one. Gone. More dust, big noticeable particles on his ears. I'm not getting all of these, folks. I don't want to take that much time. There's a weird little thing on his nose, and I don't think it's a dust spot or a spotter of dust or anything. It's just something he's got that I'm just going to get rid of because generally, if my philosophy is kind of like when I'm doing headshots of people, if it's going to be gone anyway, get rid of it. But I actually don't know what that is, so I'm just got rid of it. Let's see. There's all kinds of spots up here on his face. Stray hair. And this tool does a really good job. So there's another stray hair. So that's all I'm going to do. Okay, you get the picture and you can do it on your own. Actually, there is one other thing. There's this weird eye booger thing here. I'm just going to get rid of that. Bam, gone. Eye boogers are big time things you need to watch for on dogs. They typically have them. So those are the kinds of things I look for. Now, we've got this pretty much to where we want it. And it is now time to do the optional part, okay? So this optional part, sorry, give me a second. This optional part is actually, it can look good or it can look bad. You got to be pretty careful with it. So when you have a dark colored dog especially, they tend to blend into the background. Like I've shot a lot of black dogs and they really tend to go into the background. And so this technique can be useful. If you have a really light colored dog, you may not need it. With Rooster, it's debatable. Like you can tell him from the background. He doesn't look like he's popping out of a dark night or anything like that. But I'm going to go ahead and create sort of a backlight on the drop cloth to help him pop just a little bit more. So again, this is optional. You can do it or not. But I want you to know how to do it. So this layer that we just did the spot healing tool, I'm just going to put spot healing. One other thing I forgot to show you on the spot healing tool, when you're doing this, so I re-clicked it, make sure that it's on content aware, okay, and sample all layers. If you don't do that, you may not see it. It may not appear to do anything, right? Because it's only looking at this alpha layer. So make sure it says sample all layers so that it does a better job in content aware, so that it kind of looks around it and figures out what this area of the spot should look like. All right, now I'm going to create another layer, and we're not going to use it just yet, but watch, I'm going to create it, and I'm going to call it I'm going to call it backlight. Okay. I'm not going to use it just yet. And I'm going to go back down here to my smart object of the dog, right? And I'm going to go down here and click select subject. I need to actually click your object selection tool, for instance, is a good place to start. Up here where it says select subject, you have two options. You can use the software itself on your computer to select the subject, or you can upload it to the cloud. The general consensus is that uploading it to the cloud for selection is better. So that's what I leave selected. If you don't have a good internet connection, though, you might want to just do it on the device. Okay, so I'm going to click. Notice if I hover my object selection tool over Rooster, it auto selects him, and it's pretty good. But I'm just going to go ahead and click select subject. And you see a little spinny thing, and we're just going to wait until Shazam, there it is. Okay, he's selected. That's all we need, and that's good enough. We don't need to refine it or do anything fancy. Now, I'm going to copy by hitting Control-C, and then I'm going to paste by hitting Control-V, okay? So you can do it from your menu. Let's just do it from the menu, okay? So edit, copy. So we made a copy of this selection. Now I'm going to paste it. So I hit edit and paste. So Control-V. Notice it created right here a layer with a cutout of Rooster, okay? I'm just going to take that layer and I'm going to move it all the way to the top above my backlight layer, okay? You don't even really, like if you turn this off, nothing happens, okay? Because it's basically an exact copy of Rooster that is being placed directly over this picture of Rooster. So I'll show you how it comes in handy. So now we're going to go to the backlight. We're going to click the backlight layer. And we're going to create a backlight behind this cutout, okay? So you click your brush tool or B, okay? And what we're going to do is we are going to make the hardness of this 0. It needs to be very soft, and we're going to make the size of it pretty big. But we're actually, the best way to do this one is with your bracket keys so that you can see what you're doing. So I bring the bracket keys up about here. So I typically go right below the head, right below the top of the head, and down to about the shoulders. And that's the backlight. Now, we want our flow set to 100%, and we want our color, so you see your color palette, you want it to on white, so you can just click this little curved arrow, and it'll turn it to white. And place your brush, and I'm just going to click it one time. And it's going to look horrible, but bear with me. So bam. So notice it created a backlight behind this cutout, but over this picture of Rooster. Now, I desperately do not like this brightness, okay? But I'm not going to adjust it just yet, all right? So actually, yeah, let's just go ahead and adjust it. So the best way to adjust this, and I want you to remember this with any adjustment that you have made thus far, with any adjustment, you can diminish the effect of that adjustment with your opacity slider. That opacity slider is hugely powerful. I use it a ton. So with your backlight highlighted, go to your opacity adjuster and just drop it down. So here's gone, so 0% opacity. Here's full opacity. I usually make it gone and get it to where I can just see it. Like I want it almost to be more of a feeling than a thing, okay? So that's it. I don't know if you can see that on your computer, but it is barely there. That is actually what I like, okay? Now, the final step of this, so this is the part that's optional, by the way. This is the part that you can't really do on Capture One, but if you're editing in Capture One, you could open Photoshop from Capture One and make this adjustment. Now, the final step is to crop this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this layer, and I'm going to go all the way down to my smart object. I'm going to click Shift and click that. So all this is highlighted. And then I'm going to come over here to the right of the images or thumbnails. I'm going to right click, and I am going to select Group from layers, boom. And we're just going to leave it called Group 1. Okay. Now we've got this and we are ready to crop. So everything is under this little group and kind of out of the way. So I click my crop tool. Okay. Now this is something I like to do. When I sell these on a on a glossy metal print. They're kind of expensive, and you can also charge a premium for them. By the way, don't forget, if you sign up for my email list, I'll send you my marketing guide for how I sell these things, or how I used to. So I like to do it on a 16-inch by 20-inch metal background. The 16 to 20 inch is the perfect size. So you can put it on your wall, and it looks like a work of art of your dog. It's beautiful. The black metal background really draws out the image. It just looks fantastic. So let's crop it. And then I'm going to show you how to make a correction, right? Something that I did, and I haven't mentioned it yet because I wanted to show you this capability, but I'm going to show you how you can make corrections. So when we hit our crop tool up here, you can see the ratio, and we want to set it to ratio, and I set it to 11 inches. So this is your x-axis, and then 16 inches is your y-axis. So 11 by 16. Okay, that's what you want. And then you can just grab this and adjust it how you want it. So since roosters, a lot of times if a dog's looking straight at the camera, I will center him right in this if his body's straight and his head's straight. But if they're sitting at a little bit of an angle and their head's cocked, I think it actually kind of looks better to bring the head over to the left a little bit and let the body run down to the right corner of the image. And that creates sort of balance, okay, in my mind. So, and you can set this to wherever you want it, however much of his body you want to capture. I would go about right here. He's got a big old head on him. And if you go too short of a crop, his big head dominates the whole picture. So I like a little bit more body in there. So I'm going to go like that. And then just click done. Boom. And there's your image. It's done. But there is one thing that I forgot, and it's a little hard to see, but when you're editing this on your own, you'll see it. Down here, let me see if I can zoom in and see it. So I click my zoom tool or my magnifying glass. I zoom way in. If you look down here, you can actually barely see the floorboards of my studio. That's not fantastic, okay? So to fix that, what I'm going to do is I am going to go back to my group, open it up, and I'm going to click on spot healing, because whenever you create a new layer, it puts it right above the layer that's highlighted. So I'm going to click spot healing, create a new layer right there, like that. And on that layer, we're going to name it black background. Okay, so my fundamental problem with the picture is that I can see those floorboards, but while I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure everything is just pretty close to perfectly black. So the way I do that is, that's also going to fix another problem, by the way. So if you look here, there's a little bit of area where when I selected Rooster's cutout, I could have refined it and maybe it would have looked better, but I didn't, and you can tell that it's a cutout. So let's kind of work on that too. So what I'm going to do is make sure my black background layer is selected. I'm going to select my brush tool, or you can click B, and I'm going to go back to my palette, my color palette, hit the little curved areas and turn it back to black. Okay, and I've got a big old black brush here, and I'll just leave it where it's at, and I'm just going to paint in this whole picture. Okay, so I just click and I paint like that. Now if you notice, this whole thing turned black. Okay, so Rooster is the floorboards are now black, and anything else, if there was anything else in there that wasn't black, it's fixed. I just really do not like this dark black halo right here. It only place it appears in this image is right here, this one spot. If you look at the rest of the dog, since the dog is on a black background, you don't really see that halo anywhere else. Maybe a little bit actually right here too. So I think this area as well. So on both sides of the neck, where the cutout overlaps the white background, we can see this. And so what I want to do is I want to fix that. And again, this illustrates the great part about working in layers is that you can go back and fix things, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the smart object of the dog. I'm going to reselect the subject. And we're going to create a new cutout without that issue, okay? And then we're going to blend it back into the picture. So once you have selected your dog, select any selection object, doesn't matter which one, or any selection tool. So I just click the lasso tool and I click select and mask. And when we go to select and mask, it'll change screens. You want to make sure that you're set to on white. And then we're going to go down, we're going to do two things. The first thing is we are going to click decontaminate colors, and sometimes that helps with that sort of thing. It helps to get rid of like reflected colors along the edge and stuff, which isn't really what we're dealing with, but I just click that as a good practice. But the main tool we're going to use here is Shift Edge. So you notice if I shift the edge all the way to the right, it pulls it way out here and creates this ugly outline. Okay, if I shift it all the way to the left, it pulls the selection in towards the center of Rooster and creates an ugly selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the middle. I'm going to expand this a little bit, and I'm going to shift until we get rid of this little black halo, okay? So I'm just going to go in. How far am I going to go in? It looks like right about there. So that's in pretty deep. That's went to about minus 45, which is more than I thought it would, but let's run with it. Okay, so then down here where it says output 2, you want to set that to new layer. Okay, click OK, and that creates a new cutout of Rooster. We're going to rename it new cutout. Okay, I don't know how that got deselected, but I reselect my smart object. Now I bring this back up to the very top, right above the old cutout. Now leave the old cutout highlighted. Now what we want to do, see that got rid of it pretty good, but in the process it messed up a lot of other stuff, right? So what we want to do is we want to go back and fix. See here, if you notice there's a weird line here. So what we need to do is we need to erase the fixes it made here, but keep the fixes that it made here and here. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to create a black mask over this. And what that does is that basically hides this cutout completely. So it's no longer visible. All you're really seeing is the old cutout. So to create a black mask, so when you're making masks, remember black hides, white reveals, okay? So I'm going to click my Option key, or I think it's Alt on Windows, and I'm going to go down here to my mask icon, my layer mask icon, and click it, and it creates a black mask. Now, our black halo is back, but all of our other issues are gone, right? So now what I want to do is I just want to show the parts of this new cutout that are fixed, okay? So what I do is I go to my brush tool, or B, I click this little curved arrow and make sure that my main color is white. So there's my brush tool, okay? And I'm just gonna drop the size of it a little bit, and right here, I'm just gonna click and brush, and that gets rid of that weird halo, because it shows it shows that part only, so only the parts in white. So the neck, that's all that's shown of the new cutout. So there we have fixed it, and we are done. Hey folks, thanks again for watching this episode. I'm really honored that you took the time. And again, please subscribe. I look forward to bringing more content to you in the very near future. Take care.